The Friday the 13th series is one of the most enduring mainstays in slasher cinema. Sure, for decades, critics railed against the saga of Jason Voorhees for being nothing more than a shallow kill delivery system, cheap and hacky, yet audiences kept coming back for more. Now, the series is so embedded in pop culture that even people who've never seen the series know the face of Jason Voorhees. But unless they've sat with the whole saga, they only know part of the story. Here are 7 things even hardcore horror fans may not know about Friday the 13th. 0 stars. Today, whole generations have grown up knowing Friday the 13th as a classic series, but there are likely still some critics who would scoff to hear them say it. In fact, each entry was raked across the coals by critics, with the most well-received movie, the original, still topping out with a rotten ranking by Rotten Tomatoes Reckoning. Many critics use the series as an excuse to pin famously lacerating reviews. Gene Siskel found the original so distasteful that he used his write-up to both spoil the movie and encourage readers to write letters to Paramount in protest of the film. As the critic wrote, "I hope I've ruined Friday the 13th, which is the latest film by one of the most despicable creatures ever to infest the movie business. If any film should be X-rated on the basis of violence, this is it."
How does a guy like that go into a store and buy a new hockey mask?
Okay.
I mean, what do you think he looks like underneath the mask?
I know exactly what. I'd love to give away the ending of this picture. I'm debating on doing it.
Like the later slasher series Saw, Friday the 13th never stopped doing very poorly with critics, while working just fine for audiences. In Friday the 13th's case, critics almost seemed vindictive, wondering how people could enjoy and financially reward such a formulaic series of violent trash. You'd think they would have figured out by movie 6 or 7 that the violent trashiness was the whole point. Televised tales of terror. Friday the 13th, the series, ran for 72 episodes from 1987 to 1990, with Jason Voorhees in Camp Crystal Lake showing up a grand total of 0 times. Originally developed under the name The 13th Hour and released in some markets as Friday's Curse, the series followed 2 cousins who travel the world with an occultist researcher to collect magical or cursed relics. The open-ended story allowed for an episodic series in the vein of Supernatural or The X-Files, with one overarching plot connecting standalone tales. It was Friday the 13th in name only, which star John LeMay felt might have worked against the series in the long run.
But I think a lot of people who were really big fans of the series didn't like the fact that they stole the name and tried to sneak a fast one past everybody.
While the series is up and down in terms of quality, it's associated with the earlier work of a few great filmmakers, with episodes directed or appearances by the likes of David Cronenberg, Adam Agoyan, and Sarah Polley. Not surprisingly, Friday the 13th was soon joined on television by a Nightmare on Elm Street spin-off series called Freddy's Nightmares. While that show didn't last as long, it did at least have its famous killer Freddy Krueger in the cast.
But the game's gotta end!
The series that wouldn't die. Movie series producer Frank Mancuso Jr. was so confident that the series was over after the 3D third movie that he declared aloud at the movie's wrap party, which celebrated Jason's demise with Happy Death Day cake, that he was not going to produce another one.
When we got done with 3, I was like, okay, what I want to do now is I really want to bring this thing to an effective close.
The decision was walked back after Part 3 opened to the most successful opening weekend the series had seen yet. This time, they decided to be decisive with it, giving the 4th entry the subtitle of The Final Chapter. This being a 12-film franchise, we all know how that turned out.
Friday the 13th, 13-hour movie marathon continues right here, only on the new TNN.
Even at the time, it seemed producers had cold feet about truly killing Jason. Special effects designer Tom Savini and his team of artists made several sculptures that showed Jason not just taking a machete to the face, but being fully decapitated. These effects, of course, went unused, so Jason could live again just in case. The series would ultimately end up having 2 inaccurately named last chapters, the 4th movie and the 9th, Jason Goes to Hell: The Final Friday. Tommy Jarvis almost replaced Jason. Portrayed by 3 different actors in 3 of the franchise's movies, Tommy Jarvis is arguably the second most important character in the franchise. Not that he makes a lot of sense. Twice, the filmmakers ended a sequel with the tease that Tommy was damned to become the new Jason, possessed or corrupted by his spirit, only for the concept to be walked back each time. The 5th movie appeared to end with Tommy on the verge of murder, having been driven insane by visions of the Camp Blood Killer. The setup for a 6th movie with Tommy as the new Jason could not have been clearer or more explicit, which makes it all the more jarring when the 6th movie begins with him as a hero once again. Evidently, his insanity was cured off screen. Not that we're complaining, of course. In a franchise as shallow as Friday the 13th, the tragic story arc of a killer Tommy is probably best left unexplored.
I think they could have gone a great number of really cool places with it after that point.
Bring Jason back. When producers brought the series back for Part 5, they remained curiously determined to make the death of Jason stick. In Part 5, A New Beginning, the series tried to have it both ways, keeping Jason dead while bringing in a ruthless hockey mask-wearing copycat killer to slay in his stead. When the murderer is revealed to be a minor character in the movie, audiences scratch their heads.
Don't allow the overweight, mentally handicapped son of the local ambulance driver to get hacked over a candy bar, because chances are that driver's going to turn into a Jason Clone and try to take people out.
What's interesting about that?
Remains one of the least satisfying endings in the history of film, as far as I'm concerned.
The failure to effectively switch up the formula was acknowledged at the start of the next movie's production, with a directive coming down from producer Frank Mancuso Jr. to bring Jason back for the 6th movie no matter what.
5 was a bad dream.
So it was important to me that Jason come back in a very spectacular, fun way.
A budget slashed to pieces. The most disappointing Friday is easily the 8th one. Subtitled Jason Takes Manhattan, the 1989 release is well known for generally not taking place in Manhattan. Instead, the majority of the movie takes place on a small boat slowly floating from the confines of Crystal Lake out to the edge of the Atlantic Ocean. Somehow. This wasn't a creative decision, but rather an inconvenient financial limitation. Many fantastic NYC-centric set pieces were planned for the movie, almost none of which were actually accomplished on the film's small budget. According to producer Rob Hedden, everything about New York was going to be completely exploited and milked. There's going to be a tremendous scene on the Brooklyn Bridge, a boxing match in Madison Square Garden, Jason would go through department stores, Broadway plays, he'd even crawl onto the top of the Statue of Liberty and dive off.
Production reality set in, and it was like, okay, instead of 75% of the movie taking place in New York, we'll do 50%. And then it was, well, we can't really do 50 either.
To save money on location shooting, the production shot most of the scarce Manhattan material in the not-quite look-alike city of Vancouver.
So there was a joke running around, it was Jason Takes Vancouver instead of Jason Takes Manhattan.
A long-awaited duel. In 2003, The Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th series met in a long-awaited collision, Freddy vs. Jason. While the movie might strike the uninitiated as a cynical way to wring one last payday out of both franchises after they ran out of gas, the first attempt to make it actually took place in 1987, when the Elm Street series was ascendant and Friday was just beginning to see its box office fortunes decline. At the time, both properties were owned by different studios, meaning any crossover would involve tricky negotiations that proved difficult to navigate. Paramount owned Friday while New Line Cinema owned Nightmare, and both parties wanted the upper hand. As a result, progress on putting the movie together was full of starts and stops, not coming together until after New Line became the owner of both properties in 1989. With the franchises united under New Line, the crossover was teased at the end of 1993's Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, with Freddy's fist bursting from beneath the earth to drag Jason's mask underground. Even so, 10 years would pass and 2 more movies, Jason X and Wes Craven's New Nightmare, would come and go before the fight flick finally came together. Fortunately, after all that build-up, they ended up sticking the landing. Not only is Freddy vs. Jason a pretty fun watch, it's also the highest-grossing movie in either series by far. Teamwork, that's how you go out on top. Will it ever happen again? Well,
always room for more.